So this workshop today is part of a project called Agents of Future Promise, which asks why and how children have been used to represent the future. And we're showcasing today some of the research that's been done as part of that project in Britain and France in the modern period. And we've also got some really great speakers from different contemporary organisations, so Plan UK, War Child and Let Toys Be Toys. And they're going to be talking a little bit about their work and what they do with and for children, how they work with children. And thinking a little bit too about this theme about how children are used to represent the future in a contemporary perspective. So we're interested today in exploring how the history of children's use in this way might inform contemporary practice, and likewise how that practice might help us understand our research better.
I'm Lindsay Dodds. I'm a senior lecturer in modern European history at the University of Huddersfield, and I work on children during the Vichy era of French history. That's the period 1940 to 1944. I started getting interested in the way that children seemed to be carrying ideological messages that the government was trying to propagate into French society during this period. And through this project, I've discovered much more than that. I've found out that it's more than just carrying messages. Children were actually actively involved in government initiatives to push the regime's values and ideas forward within society, and their participation was very active and very willing. So it's been a really good project to find out a lot more about how children were involved in spreading the ideas that this short-lived government was trying to further within French society.
I'm Maryclaire Martin. I'm head of the Centre for the Study of Play and Recreation at the University of Greenwich, and so I work on the history of children as well as teaching about it. So in terms of thinking about how children are connected with the future, some of my research is on children and religion. What's really interesting is often how children are seen as having a religious power even if they're young, and could be often thought to even convert whole areas. John Wesley described how when he'd been to Bolton, there were all these hundreds of children, Sunday school children, who completely changed the character of the area, and so on. There's lots of 19th century material encouraging children to go home and convert their parents. That fits in really interestingly with Lindsay's talk, and how about how children were expected to sort of relate to Marshal Pétain and be agents of the state. But of course it's been like that in lots of totalitarian regimes.
I'm Vicki Crew. I'm based at Cardiff University, and I'm an archaeologist by training. And my interest in childhood really is around the material culture of childhood and aspects of children's culture, popular culture, and what that might tell us about adults' expectations on children, the expectations that were placed on them, how toys and games and other items that were made for children might have been used to inculcate certain ideas and behaviours in them. So today I'm particularly looking at the period of the Boer War from 1899 to 1902 in Britain, and looking at this very specific time frame to think about how toys and games that were given to children might have reflected the war. So things like toy soldiers are an obvious example, but then there are other items that I found that are perhaps slightly more surprising that gave children an idea of battle, of war, in quite a glamorised, patriotic way. And so what I'll be talking about is the impact that had on children, and how that gave them an idea of war that then they could carry into their futures and become future soldiers in the case of boys. But then there's a slightly different pattern going on with girls, and it seems that they were being told that their role in the future was to be mothers, to bring into the world new soldiers as well. So that's what I'll be talking about today.
You know, it's become a new normality, that it feels normal to have things labelled by gender, but the extent to which toys have been labelled and marketed by gender has fluctuated a great deal over time.
My name's Simon Slight. I'm a senior lecturer here at King's College London. My principal field is in Australian history, but more recently I've been exploring youth cultures in Britain and America, as well as in Australia. So I've been asked to think about how children come to represent the future, and there are various ways in which this has occurred and cropped up within my own research. Most recently I've been thinking about the concept of the right to the city, which is something that grows out of the work of Henri Lefebvre originally in the 1960s, but has been taken up with some gusto in more recent years by campaigners for things like play space in streets and the capacity for children to shape the spaces in which they live. Now, often these kind of endeavours are adult organised, but one of the things I think that's particularly interesting is where children and young people themselves assert those rights to shape their own future. So we're standing here in King's College, London. Just across the river from here is South Bank, and that's an area where a group of young skateboarders and people who were former skateboarders in their youth have been fighting to protect the area of the Undercroft from redevelopment into commercial space. And one often sees this tendency within cities that the spaces of childhood are often contested and can be commercialised. It's part of what historians have called the islanding of children and childhood into discrete and functional sites for their containment, if you will. And this endeavour at South Bank is very much an effort to sort of push back against that sort of that sort of move more broadly within culture and society, and does fit into that broader still right to the city movement.
So my name's Ann Sheridan Breakwell, and I'm a DPhil student at Oxford, working on the evacuation of children during the Spanish Civil War from Madrid that was being bombed to the eastern provinces of Spain. And basically, when I saw the title of the workshop today, I thought, how come I didn't think of that title? Agents of Future Promise is exactly how these children become represented by the Spanish Republic, by trade union organisations who are also involved in moving them to places of safety. And it surfaces a lot in propaganda that persuades parents to part with their children.